They never should have crashed here. Not on this planet. Not on a world where the trees could strangle you. The rivers were filled with unseen predators, and the night belonged to the hunt. Xiron had read the reports, the ones that whispered about Earth in hushed tones, a place too wild, too ruthless for anything but humans to survive. And yet, here they were, stranded, vulnerable, and facing the one creature the galaxy feared most. A human stepped from the shadows, his sharp blue eyes locking onto them. "You lost?" he asked, voice calm. Xiron swallowed hard. Oh, they were more than lost. They were in his world now. Before we start, please, subscribe to the channel by clicking the card button on the top right corner now, and hit the notification bell so you can get amazing daily stories as and when published. Please do comment your views about the story or any topic that you want to get a story on. We will make it happen. Let's dive in the story. The escape pod tore through the storm-ridden sky, a burning streak of metal hurtling toward the ground. Inside, alarms blared, flashing red lights, casting erratic shadows against the steel walls. The cabin was a mess. Loose wiring sparked. Debris floated weightlessly for a split second before gravity slammed it back down. The violent shaking made it nearly impossible to stay seated. Xiron gritted his teeth, his three-clawed hands gripping the control panel. The screens were glitching, throwing up warnings he had no time to acknowledge. His four golden eyes darted between the flickering numbers. The planet's gravity was dragging them in fast. Too fast. "Brace yourselves," he shouted over the noise. "This is a terrible idea." Ralvek snapped, his crystalline form shifting colors in rapid succession, a sure sign of panic. "We should have ejected sooner." "Oh, sure," and floated around in deep space until he froze to death. "Brilliant plan," Xiron shot back. Sura, who had been eerily quiet through most of the descent, let out a frustrated growl. "Shut up, both of you. We're not dead yet." Her sleek obsidian suit gleamed under the emergency lights as she steadied herself against the wall. The pod bucked violently as it entered the atmosphere, rattling their bones. The pressure was immense. Xiron's muscles strained as he struggled to keep control. Then, a deafening boom as they hit the ground. For a split second, everything was still. Then the metal groaned. The scent of scorched earth filled the air, and the weight of gravity settled fully on their bodies. A low, rumbling roar echoed from outside. Ralvek's translucent fingers clenched. "Tell me that was just the wind." Sura exhaled sharply, pressing her palm against her forehead. That was not the wind. Xiron forced himself upright, his body aching from the impact. His claws flew over the cracked display screen, pulling up whatever planetary data the damaged system could still process. He frowned. "Well, this is bad." "Oh, now it's bad?" Ralvek groaned. "Because crashing wasn't bad enough? We're on Earth." Xiron's voice was grave. Silence. Then, in perfect synchronization, Sura and Ralvek both swore. "You have got to be kidding me." Sura pushed past Xiron, peering through the cracked viewport. Outside, towering jungle trees swayed in the wind, their blackened bark slick from the rain. Strange glowing fungi pulsed against the foliage. The air was thick, heavy with humidity. The shadows between the trees seemed to move. Something was out there, watching. Ralvek groaned. "Of all the planets in the galaxy, why do we have to crash on a death world?" Xiron didn't answer. His attention was drawn to something else, movement at the edge of the clearing. At first, it was just a flicker, the barest shift in the darkness. Then a figure emerged, stepping into the dim light. A human, tall, broad-shouldered, clad in reinforced gear that looked both practical and lethal. A rifle was slung across his back, and a gleaming blade rested at his side. His face was weathered, tanned from years of exposure to the elements. His sharp blue eyes scanned the pod, unbothered. Sura inhaled sharply. "No way." The human took another step forward, his boots crunching against the damp earth. Then, in perfect galactic standard, he spoke. "You lost." Ralvek stiffened. "He can talk." "Of course he can talk," Zyron hissed. "He's human, not a..." The human tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You gonna keep whispering, or are you gonna tell me why you crashed in my backyard?" Sura blinked, glancing between Zyron and Ralvek. The three of them had been prepared for monsters, for ambushes, for a planet that would try to kill them on sight. They had not been prepared for this. Zyron's pulse thundered in his ears. He wasn't sure what was more unsettling, the fact that they had just survived a crash landing, or the fact that a human was standing right in front of them, speaking their language like it was nothing. Sura was the first to move, stepping forward with a confidence that only barely masked her tension. "You live here?" she asked, voice sharp. The human shrugged. For now. Ralvek's crystalline body flickered with shifting colors, his species' way of displaying anxiety. "That's not an answer." The human's gaze flicked toward him. His expression remained calm, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating. "You always this twitchy, or is it just because of me?" he asked. Ralvek scowled. "I'm not twitchy." "You're very twitchy," Zyron muttered under his breath. Sura ignored them both, eyes locked onto the human. "What's your name?" "Daniel," he said simply. A beat of silence. Then Zyron cleared his throat, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "So, Daniel, you're not planning to kill us, are you?" The human gave a slow smirk. "Not unless you give me a reason to." Ralvek groaned. "Fantastic. That's so reassuring." A deep, guttural snarl echoed from the trees. It was low, rumbling, vibrating through the damp air like a warning. Instinct kicked in. Sura's hand flew to the plasma knife at her side. Zyron braced himself, and Ralvek took a nervous step back. Daniel didn't even flinch. Instead, he sighed, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. "Damn things never stop hunting at night," he muttered. Zyron stared at him. "You say that like it's a minor inconvenience." Daniel unslung the rifle from his back in one fluid motion. The moonlight glinted off the polished metal. "Because it is," he said. A shadow moved between the trees. It was fast, big, too big. 6 legs, sharp ridges of bone along its spine, eyes that burned like embers in the dark. It let out another growl, the sound rattling deep in their chests. Ralvek inhaled sharply. That is not a friendly-looking creature." "Nope," Daniel agreed. Then, without hesitation, he raised his rifle and fired. The gunshot split the air, deafening in the jungle silence. The creature reared back, snarling, its thick hide barely pierced by the shot. Daniel fired again, this time hitting just beneath its eye. The beast let out a horrific screech before crashing into the undergrowth, twitching in its final moments. Daniel exhaled, lowering his gun. That should keep the rest of them away for a while. Sura stared at him, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. "Did you just kill that thing like it was nothing?" Daniel glanced at her. "Would you rather it killed you?" Zyron let out a long breath. "Okay, new rule. We do not piss off the human." Ralvek nodded vigorously. "Agreed." Daniel smirked. "Smart choice." For a moment, nobody spoke. The jungle was quiet again, save for the distant hum of insects and the rustling of leaves. Sura's gaze lingered on the corpse of a beast, then shifted back to Daniel. "You saved us," she said, voice unreadable. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Yeah." "Why?" Another shrug. "Because I felt like it." Zyron frowned. "That's a pretty terrible reason." Daniel chuckled. "Maybe." Ralvek ran a hand down his face. "I hate this planet." "Join the club," Daniel said dryly. A breeze rolled through the clearing, stirring the leaves. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blood. Daniel slid his rifle back into place. "You coming or what?" Sura narrowed her eyes. "Coming where?" "To my outpost," he said. "It's safe there." "Well, safer than here, anyway." Zyron and Ralvek exchanged uneasy glances. The idea of following a human, especially one who seemed far too comfortable on this death world, felt like a gamble. But staying here? That wasn't an option. Sura made the decision for them. "We're coming." Daniel smirked. "Good choice." He turned, walking into the jungle without another word. Sura followed. Zyron let out a heavy sigh before trudging after her. Ralvek hesitated, glaring at the dead creature one last time. Then he muttered under his breath, "I'm going to die here," and stomped after them. The jungle was alive with movement. Leaves rustled overhead. Unseen creatures slithered through the undergrowth, and the occasional distant roar reminded them that they were walking through a predator's paradise. Sura kept her hand close to the plasma knife strapped to her thigh, her sharp eyes darting between the shadows. Zyron walked beside her, tense, his claws flexing involuntarily. Ralvek trailed slightly behind, muttering to himself in barely contained distress. "This is insane," he grumbled. "We're following a human. On Earth, a planet where everything wants to kill us." "Correction," Zyron said, keeping his voice low. "We're following a heavily armed human. There's a difference." Ralvek scoffed. "Oh yes, so reassuring." Daniel walked ahead of them, silent and purposeful. His boots made almost no sound against the damp earth, his rifle slung loosely over his back. Yet his posture remained relaxed. Too relaxed, like a man who knew he was the most dangerous thing in the jungle. Sura studied him as they moved. There was something about the way he carried himself. Not just confidence, but control. He didn't just survive on this planet. He owned it. "How far is this place of yours?" she asked. Daniel didn't turn his head. "Not far." Ralvek let out a dramatic sigh. "Not far. Wonderful. That's vague and unhelpful. Do humans always speak in riddles?" Daniel smirked. "Only when it's fun." Sura fought the urge to roll her eyes. They continued in silence until the trees began to thin, the dense jungle giving way to a clearing. At the center of it stood a structure, part metal, part wood, reinforced with thick walls and surrounded by automated defense turrets that hummed softly in the night. The place looked like it had been built piece by piece over the years, an odd fusion of scavenged technology and primitive craftsmanship. Zyron let out a low whistle. "Well, I was expecting something worse." Daniel chuckled. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." They stepped closer, and Sura's sharp eyes caught movement near the outer walls. At first, she tensed, reaching for her weapon, but then she saw what it was. A creature. It was large, six-legged, with armored scales that shimmered faintly in the dim light. It stood just beyond the fence, watching them with curious, intelligent eyes. Ralvek froze. What is that?" Daniel barely spared a glance. "That's Bones." Zyron frowned. "Bones? Yeah," Daniel said casually. "He's friendly." Ralvek's eyes widened. That thing is friendly?" Daniel shrugged. "Depends on who you are." Sura narrowed her eyes. "And what if you're us?" Daniel finally turned to look at her, his gaze steady. "Guess we'll find out." A tense silence stretched between them before Daniel pressed a small device at his belt. The heavy metal gate of the outpost slid open with a mechanical hiss. "Welcome to my humble home," he said, stepping inside. Zyron hesitated. "Do we trust this?" Ralvek snorted. "Absolutely not." Sura exhaled sharply, making the decision for them. She stepped through the gate without hesitation. Zyron groaned. "Of course." Ralvek sighed in defeat. "We're so going to die." And with that, they followed the human inside. The inside of the outpost was not what they expected. It wasn't some primitive, barely functioning shack like they had assumed. Instead, it was organized, well-structured, a clear blend of technology and survivalist ingenuity. Dim overhead lights cast a warm glow on metal walls, while sturdy wooden furniture filled the space, giving it a strange sense of comfort. The air carried the scent of burning wood, dried meat, and something faintly metallic. Zyron's sharp gaze swept across the room, noting the weapons neatly stacked on the far wall, the advanced-looking tools scattered across a workbench, and the old Federation insignia carved into a metal panel near the entrance. "You were with the Federation," he observed. Daniel shrugged, tossing his rifle onto a chair. "Once upon a time." Ralvek made a face. "I don't trust that answer." "You don't trust anything," Sura muttered. "For good reason." Ralvek gestured wildly. "In case you forgot, we are inside a human's den. A human who, might I remind you, is too comfortable on this death world." Daniel smirked as he leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You keep saying death world like it's a bad thing." Zyron scoffed. "It is a bad thing. Your species is insane for living here." Daniel raised a brow. "And yet, here you are." Sura couldn't help but smirk at that. Zyron and Ralvek both scowled. Daniel pushed off the counter. "You hungry?" Zyron hesitated. "What kind of food do you even have?" "Relax, I'm not going to serve you something that'll melt your insides." Daniel walked over to what looked like a storage unit, pulling out a tray of assorted food. "I keep supplies from different trade ships. Federation-grade provisions. You'll live." Ralvek eyed the tray, suspiciously. "You expect me to believe that a human, on Earth, just happens to have properly prepared alien food?" Daniel sighed. "No, I expect you to eat it or shut up." Sura snorted as she took a seat, picking up a piece of dried fruit that vaguely resembled something edible. She took a cautious bite. It wasn't bad. Zyron grabbed a nutrient bar, chewing slowly, his eyes never leaving Daniel. Ralvek, of course, remained suspicious. "You're awfully generous for a species known for war." Daniel's expression darkened slightly. "You think we like being known for war?" Ralvek blinked, caught off guard. "Aye." Daniel leaned forward. "The Federation likes to tell stories. They like to paint us as bloodthirsty animals because they don't understand us. You want to know the truth?" No one spoke. Daniel's voice dropped to something almost dangerous. "We fight because we have to. Because this galaxy doesn't leave us a choice." Silence. Sura studied him carefully. There was weight in his words, like he was speaking from experience. Zyron cleared his throat. "Well, that's depressing." Daniel smirked, shaking off the tension. "Welcome to Earth." Ralvek leaned back, crossing his arms. "This place sucks." Daniel chuckled. "Then why do I get the feeling you'll be here for a while?" Sura's fingers twitched slightly as she met his gaze. For some reason, she had the same feeling. The fire crackled in the small stove, filling the room with a low, steady warmth. Outside, the jungle murmured with life. Distant howls, rustling leaves, the occasional snap of a branch under something large. The outpost's walls were thick, reinforced, but there was still a sense that they were being watched. Ralvek sat rigid in his seat, his crystalline form faintly glowing in agitation. "I can't believe we're just sitting here, relaxing, in a human's house." Zyron leaned back against the sturdy chair, arms crossed. "Would you rather be out there?" He tilted his head toward the window, where something with too many legs skittered past in the darkness. Ralvek muttered something under his breath and took another cautious bite of his food. Sura, meanwhile, was watching Daniel. He moved through the space effortlessly, like he had claimed it, like every inch of this world belonged to him. She found herself unsettled by that. Curious, but unsettled. "You built all this yourself?" she finally asked. Daniel glanced at her as he grabbed a metal cup, pouring himself a drink. "Mostly. Took parts from crashed ships, old Federation junk, whatever I could trade with the offworlders." Ralvek scoffed. "And you just decided to stay? Alone?" Daniel took a sip, his expression unreadable. "Not at first." The room went quiet. Zyron's sharp gaze narrowed. "What happened?" Daniel exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Had a team. Scientists, researchers. We came here to study Earth's ecosystem, how it adapted after the collapse of human civilization in certain regions." His fingers drummed against the metal cup. "Then things went wrong." Sura didn't miss the flicker of something in his eyes. What kind of wrong? She pressed. Daniel's jaw tightened. The kind that gets people killed. A heavy silence settled over them. The fire crackled. The jungle whispered. Ralvek shifted uncomfortably. And you just stayed? Daniel shrugged. Figured I'd last longer here than out there. Zyron let out a slow breath. You know, that doesn't exactly make you sound sane. Daniel smirked. Maybe I'm not. Sura leaned forward, resting her arms on the table. You're not just surviving here, she said, watching him closely. You're thriving. Daniel held her gaze. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not, she admitted. It's just unusual. A beat of silence. Then Daniel's smirk widened. You're interested. Sura scoffed. I'm observing. Zyron sighed. Oh great. She's intrigued. That's never a good sign. Ralvek groaned, rubbing his temples. I hate this planet. Daniel chuckled, finishing his drink. Good. That means you'll stick around long enough to get used to it. Sura didn't answer, because for some reason, she had the sinking feeling he was right. A sharp ping echoed through the outpost, cutting through the quiet hum of the jungle. The sound sent a jolt through Zyron, who immediately turned toward the source, a signal flashing on Daniel's console. Ralvek nearly choked on his drink. Tell me that's not what I think it is. Daniel walked over, his movements calm, but there was a shift in his demeanor, a quiet tension that hadn't been there before. He tapped the screen, scanning the incoming transmission. Zyron stood, his claws tightening at his sides. Federation distress beacon? Daniel's jaw ticked. Looks like it. Ralvek nearly jumped to his feet. We're getting rescued. Finally. Sura didn't move. She didn't react the way the others did. Her eyes stayed locked on Daniel. He wasn't relieved. He was silent. Zyron ran a hand over his face. I can't believe it. We're actually getting out of here. Ralvek let out a half-crazed laugh. Oh, I take back everything I said about this awful, disgusting, predator-infested hellhole. I'm going to sleep in an actual bed again. Sura was still watching Daniel. His shoulders were tense, his fingers resting a little too firmly against the console. You don't look happy, she said. Daniel's blue eyes flicked up to hers, unreadable. Maybe I don't like goodbyes. Zyron scoffed. Oh, don't be dramatic, human. This was always temporary. We appreciate the help. Really, but we're not meant to be here. Ralvek nodded vigorously. Exactly. We're not like you. We don't belong on a planet where the plants can eat you and the sky stalkers hunt for sport. Daniel exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. Yeah, I get it. Something about the way he said it made Sura's chest tighten. Ralvek turned to her. Come on, Sura. You should be thrilled. We're going home. She didn't answer right away. Home. The word felt strange, like a concept she had abandoned a long time ago. Daniel's voice was quiet. You're hesitating. Zyron frowned. What? Daniel didn't take his eyes off Sura. She doesn't want to leave. Ralvek let out a bark of laughter. What? That's ridiculous. Of course, she wants to leave. Sura didn't move, didn't speak, because Daniel was right. Zyron stared at her. Sura. She exhaled, finally dragging her gaze away from Daniel. I don't know. Ralvek looked like he might faint. Don't know. How do you not know? This isn't complicated. We came here by accident. We leave. End of story. Daniel smirked slightly, shaking his head. Not for her. Sura turned back to him, something unreadable in her expression. You want me to stay? Daniel didn't confirm it outright, but he didn't deny it either. Ralvek groaned. Oh, for stars' sake. I cannot handle whatever is happening right now. Zyron sighed. We leave in the morning. Figure it out before then. Sura swallowed hard as the others walked away, leaving her alone with Daniel. Neither of them spoke, because somehow they already knew how this was going to end. The morning air was crisp, the jungle strangely quiet as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the dense canopy. The hum of the approaching Federation rescue ship grew louder, vibrating through the ground. It was here, their way home. Ralvek was practically bouncing on his heels, his crystalline skin shimmering in excitement. "I never thought I'd say this, but I could kiss a Federation officer right now." Zyron rolled his eyes. "Please don't." Daniel stood a few steps away, arms crossed over his chest, watching as the ship descended. His face was unreadable, but Sura had spent enough time around him now to sense what he wasn't saying. She stepped forward. "This is it." Daniel didn't move. "Guess so." She exhaled, glancing towards Zyron and Ralvek, who were busy checking the cargo hold one last time. They were ready to leave. They had been since the moment the distress beacon pinged. She wasn't. Sura's gaze flicked back to Daniel. He stood firm, like a man who belonged nowhere but here. His stance was relaxed, but she could see the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers curled slightly against his arms. "You could come with us," she said. Daniel smirked, but it was hollow. "You know that's not my thing." She swallowed, glancing at the ship as the landing gear deployed. The finality of this moment was sinking in fast, pressing against her ribs like a weight she hadn't prepared for. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. Daniel tilted his head, studying her. His blue eyes held something deeper, something unspoken. "You belong out there," he said. "I belong here." Sura's fingers twitched at her side. She should have expected that answer. Hell, maybe she even wanted it. Because if he had said yes, if he had agreed to leave, something about that would have felt wrong. She turned back to the ship, her legs feeling heavier with every step. Zyron was already at the ramp, calling over his shoulder. "Let's go, Sura. We don't have all day." Ralvek was grinning. "Say goodbye to this nightmare planet." She hesitated, and that was when she knew. Her heart pounded as she turned back around. "I am staying." Ralvek froze mid-step. "Excuse me." Zyron nearly tripped. "What?" Sura lifted her chin. "You heard me." Ralvek's face twisted in horror. "Oh no. No, no, no. This is not happening." Zyron groaned. "Sura, be serious." "I am," she said firmly. Daniel arched a brow, amused. "Didn't expect that, did you?" Ralvek threw his hands in the air. "She's lost her mind. This is why I said never trust a human. They get into your head, and suddenly you think staying on a death world is a great idea." Zyron pinched the bridge of his nose. "Sura, explain." She inhaled deeply. "I don't belong out there anymore." Ralvek's voice cracked. "You don't belong here either." She glanced at Daniel. He didn't say anything, just watched her with that same knowing look, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Ralvek groaned, dragging a hand down his face. "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." Zyron sighed. "She's made up her mind." Ralvek glared at Daniel. "This is your fault." Daniel smirked. "I'm fine with that." The rescue ship's engines rumbled, signaling final departure. Zyron grabbed Ralvek's shoulder, pulling him back toward the ramp. "Come on, let's go before they leave us behind too." Ralvek was still muttering curses as they boarded. Sura stood beside Daniel, watching as the ship ascended, lifting off the jungle floor. The ramp sealed, and within moments, they were gone. Just like that. She exhaled, shoulders relaxing. "Well, that's that." Daniel chuckled. "Looks like it." She turned to face him fully. "Think you can handle having me around?" His smirk deepened. "I was going to ask you the same thing." Sura rolled her eyes. "You're unbearable." Daniel grinned. "You stayed." She smirked. "Shut up." And with that, she followed him back toward the outpost, into the wild, untamed world that, against all odds, felt more like home than anywhere she had ever known. Here is the story ends. If you enjoyed and want to watch more thrilling sci-fi adventures, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Dive into epic battles, explore distant galaxies, and join brave heroes as they fight for survival against impossible odds. Let us know in comments if you want next chapters to publish soon. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and become part of the journey. Together, we'll keep the last light burning. Subscribe now and let the adventure continue.